So we
Yeah.
think of two lines, 0 on the left and 10 on the right, and 10 being the best case scenario. And if you can visualize putting an X on that line of what's good for you in your career right now, where do you land on the 0 to 10? And below that, where do you land on good for the world, 0 to 10? And if you've got
Mm.
those numbers sort of marked in your head, and we think of, okay, in 2 years' time, where do you want to be? And mark a 0 on the part where you want to be. If there's a gap, that's what I do.
Welcome to the Small Steps, Big Wins podcast. I'm dedicated to helping you take control of your life. Together, we'll explore practical tips, expert advice, and inspiring stories to help you overcome obstacles and achieve your goals. Making small changes is possible and can lead to big results. Are you ready? Let's go do this. Well, welcome, Small Steps, Big Wins family. I'm excited to have Georgie Enthoven with me today. She's an author, a thought leader, podcaster, and disruptor for good. I love that. We're going to get into that. I want to know what that really means. Georgie, welcome. Welcome.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. I'm very excited to be part of your conversations.
Yeah, me too. Me too. You have such a diverse and unique background. Your bio says that you've taken the scenic route for your unconventional career path. I'd love if you take a few minutes, let the world know who you are and what that unconventional path looked like.
Yeah. Well, thank you for that. I'm somebody who's lived in a lot of countries, continents, and it was more my adventurous spirit than anything else that got me to all these places. And so my outlook on life is always adventure. And when I think about my career, it's also an adventure. And so when I say I've taken the scenic route, part of it is because I was exploring, and the other part is because I was going after the wrong things. And I was trying to find my home. And so when I graduated from UC Berkeley way back when, I really wanted to do good things in the world. And I had studied at the time, I had a major called Third World Development, which would now be called Emerging Markets. And I really thought maybe I'll go work for the World Bank or do something along those lines. And I was living in San Francisco, and I found the only sort of entry level jobs to be handing out flyers for Greenpeace and for Nature Conservancy. And I felt like, although I really believed in those organizations, I felt that I'd be underutilized and my ambition was greater than the role or where I could see those roles going. And so, although I tried, I ended up getting gobbled up in the tech world, and quite quickly sort of lent into the ambition side of what I wanted to do and started moving up and getting promoted. And I was in marketing and then business development, and starting with software, ending on websites. And it felt very cutting edge. And I was really invigorated with the work, but I ended up trying to fit in the soul part on the side. And I noticed, like, I started teaching in a school in East Palo Alto, in a low income school. And I did that weekly. And then I started helping wire schools with tech at the time to get internet access, and then help young people with business plans. And I was trying to fit this all on the side. And that sort of was a map of like how my career started. So I was in a job that was good for me. I was earning great income, but I really lacked a connection to something bigger, and tried to fit it in on the side. And then I sort of zigzagged, and after I'd had children, I was living in Mexico City with my husband, and I went completely to the other side, which is doing amazing work for the world, but I didn't get paid very well. And I also was dedicating a lot of time, and it's very emotionally exhausting doing some of that work. It sort of really hits at your heart. And so I thought, I can do this, but I just can't last a long time. And so I ended up back and forth in these different roles, either good for me or good for the world. And eventually I started to see people who seemed to combine both. And that really lit me up of like, that is amazing. And I want to know about those people and what they do. And so that is really the scenic route, the top line of the journey that I was on. But yeah, a lot of zigzagging.
So the common theme is you've got your work, you've got what you're passionate about, and you've spent the last, I don't know how many years trying to figure out and really learn about how to combine them both. And then it's getting rolled into, you have a book coming out April 8th, which it's called Work That's Worth It. So let's take a few minutes, talk about your book coming out. What prompted you to decide to write it and who's it for?
Yeah. I mean, the very deep level is I have 3 children and I am concerned about the world we're leaving them. And so that is sort of at the deepest part is how do I look them in the eye and say that I've contributed to the solutions, not only the problems. I think we're all
Mm,
guilty of contributing to the problems, but I want to let them know that I care and that I have given my time and energy to something positive. And so that's sort of like the real deep level. But my career journey led me to understand that there are so many people like myself out there who really wanted to do good in the world, but also needed to scratch the ambition piece. And I learned that the average career is 90,000 hours from a Harvard Business Review article.
mm,
And I just thought, and at the same time, I had also seen a cartoon about 2 women drinking some water on the sofa together, and they were looking at the weather in the background with tornadoes, floods. And the dialogue between them is, I don't think giving up straws is going to be enough. And I just thought, you know what? 90,000 hours is such an incredible amount of time. That's such a
yeah.
powerful energy to put out into the world. And what if we use those hours to really contribute to something positively and think about our career in that way versus, think about I'm in marketing and I want the next promotion in marketing. What if we really were chasing a contribution?
Okay. So you help people to actually bridge that gap.
Yeah, well,
So, yeah.
actually, yeah. I mean, the interesting thing is on my research journey, what I realized is you can't ask ambitious people just to do good. They have to
Mm,
actually meet their own needs too. They've got bills to pay, they've got dreams, they
right.
want to go on vacation. So I became particularly curious where you can build a career that meets your needs and contributes positively to the world. And so what I do, like, is it okay if I do a
Yeah.
visual exercise?
Yeah,
Um,
sure.
okay. So if we
Yeah.
think of 2 lines, 0 on the left and 10 on the right, and 10 being the best case scenario. And if you can visualize putting an X on that line of what's good for you in your career right now, where do you land on the 0 to 10? And below that, where do you land on good for the world, 0 to 10? And if you've got
Mm,
those numbers sort of marked in your head, and we think of, okay, in 2 years' time, where do you want to be? And mark a 0 on the part where you want to be. If there's a gap, that's what I do.
okay.
I help you close that gap so that you are living your full potential. And we don't always have time to be at a 10 if we ever do, because we all market differently. But what you want is your X's and O's to be in a similar place.
Okay. All right. You mentioned a couple times doing good for the world. How do you define that? Because it's easy to define the career, right? But how do you define
Good
looking
for the
at like
world. Yeah.
determining whether something's good for the world? What
I
does
love I love that you asked that question because that was one of the first roadblocks I faced when writing the book. And I thought, oh gosh, I do not want to be the police of what's good. And I do have a coaching background. And so I think what became really apparent to me is that's our individual job. We are each responsible to figure out what good for the world means for us and our
Mm,
capacity. I don't get to tell you what's good for the world. You will know in your body and it'll give you energy. So I think when it comes to good for the world, I mean, some basics are what are the problems you're solving? And are those problems worth your time?
it's a good question to ask.
Yeah,
What problem am I solving? When you hear that good for the world, you think of something grandiose and really, really big. But I'm imagining it could be just within your own community
a
or
hundred
just
percent.
within your own family,
Yeah.
not necessarily having something that has a global impact.
Yeah, 100%. For some people, it's local, and yeah, you're right, even in your family. And for other people, I mean, one of the people I interview in the book is a company called Verta, and they're trying to reverse diabetes and
Mm,
obesity in 1 billion people. So
wow.
that's a big stage. But
Yeah.
there are other people who are working on something like it could be a restaurant giving fair wage to their employees. So it's whatever is works for you and is an area where you can contribute and feel
Mhm.
aligned and happy with that contribution.
Almost like igniting your soul and then what you can do to give back to somebody in that in that capacity. I love it.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
like that you say that because sometimes I get questions of people saying, I just can't imagine doing that, or I think I've got bills to pay, debt to pay off, or whatever it
Yeah.
is. And I believe there are enough people who really need their soul connected to what they're doing and how they're showing up every day. I don't
Mhm.
think everybody's like that, but I do think there's a large pool of people who are, and I was like that, and I needed it. And so our the world of work that we have designed is not designed to be connected. It's I designed maybe even more robotic, but in the
Yeah.
world that we're entering into with AI, and I think we really need to lean back onto what makes us human. And
Mm.
caring about what we do is a huge part of what drives our motivation to show up
Mhm.
every day.
Yeah. Can you share a pivotal moment, like, when you realized that what you're doing isn't in alignment with doing good and how you kinda made that shift? What was your path?
Yeah, I mean, I did share a bit of my story working in tech, and I think for me the clear sign was noticing that I'm trying to fit so much in on the side, and so
Mm.
that was like obviously I was not satisfied on the good for the world piece of the equation, but I just had a wonderful conversation with a South African who was a very successful CEO of private corporations, global corporations, and he really felt very confident in his career and what he had achieved. And somebody whispered in his ear after he had sold a company and said, "Come and check this out." And it's a social enterprise and it helps with youth unemployment. And in South Africa,
Mm.
youth unemployment can be up to 60%. So it's a
Wow.
major problem. And he got into that work and it's been 15 years. And he just says, "My whole life changed
Wow.
because." And it's interesting what attracts people. Like I call this kind of work disruptors for good because usually we're having to be rebels, disruptors, even though it's, ironic that sort of giving positively to the world, you're the rebel. But it is what was interesting for him is that the scope and the challenge of the problem was so big that it enthralled him.
Mm.
And it gave him so much more excitement than the private sector, which he seemed to master quite easily.
Mm.
And
Okay.
it's the complexity of the problem for him that was just, I could just give my whole life to this and move it just a little bit, but
Yeah.
that little bit is going to be worth it.
Yeah. Do you find, like, when something is bigger than you, it keeps you from getting bored as well?
Yeah.
Because there's always something else, like, there's the big common goal, like, the thing you're working towards, but there's so many moving parts and so many things that encompass it that it helps to continue to fuel and become exciting without becoming boring.
That's such an important
Yeah.
point too. And I agree with you in the times of my life that I are difficult. I think for me, getting perspective and realizing so many people have experienced what I'm experiencing and they've gotten through it. And in order to do that, you've got to sort of let go and see a way bigger world and being connected to something far greater than you and your particular problem at the time is, I find it really helpful. And it's like, if I think about that, it's like if you have a plate, you can't necessarily control the bad stuff on the plate. Like sometimes you can, but maybe you can't. But you can put good stuff on the plate. And that
Mm.
I find is my job is for me personally is keep putting good stuff on the plate so that the bad is just a way smaller piece. And I just really like to focus on contributing positively. And
Mm.
that really helps me.
So that positive mindset just keeps fueling you. You even mentioned in there when things get harder, you get challenged, it's much easier to give up when you don't have something bigger, isn't it?
Yeah, when you're not connected. Yeah, yeah. I was amazed when I was interviewing inspiring role models for my book how they had a common ingredient. And I went to Harvard Business School and nobody ever really talked about this then, but I noticed in these people who I deem as incredibly successful, their common ingredient is they are really clear on the contribution they're going to make to the world that
Mm.
they're driving towards. It's like a future anchor. And they make statements like, "I will end homelessness in my generation. I will reverse
Wow.
diabetes in 1 billion people." Whatever it is, whatever your topic is, but they carve a chunk out that they want to achieve,
Wow.
and it's so motivating. And then what happens, which is amazing, is people come to you. So it creates a gravity, and anyone who thinks on that topic or has a way to contribute wants to be aligned with you, and
Mhm.
so the momentum starts to be an upward spiral, which is
Mhm.
amazing.
Oh, that's cool. That's cool. Your book, it helps people find the balance between work and career fulfillment. So I'm curious on your thoughts on success and how you approach that definition.
Yeah. Well, I have worked with a lot of people who come to me because they are working and actually contributing very positively to the world, but they're not being compensated for it. And
Mm,
as I had mentioned earlier, I've experienced both sides of that coin. And I think success comes when you are compensated for your work. And I have a passion to get the kind-hearted people in the world a bigger stage. So I would like to see them in C suites and in boardrooms. And so I often find that the nicest, kindest people among us play small by design.
mm.
And
Why
so,
is that? Why is it? That I'm
well,
sorry, I mean, like, why would the kindest people play small?
Well, it's a lot of the like I think it happens more to women, but this good girl conditioning, but it doesn't have to
Mm,
be female, but it's like look after others, do good for others. Women end up starting a lot of not-for-profits and they can just they can't raise a significant amount of money and they spend most of their time trying to get money into the organization. And so I think that I think if you are one of those kind-hearted people, like one of the big that I pillars that I deal with in the book is what does compensation mean for you? What are your internal blocks there and what are some external blocks and what would you like to be compensated? And then let's go find the roles that work that allow you to have your impact, potentially even a greater impact and that look after you. Because 90,000 hours is a long time. And
mm,
what I find is a lot of the people who are doing great work in the world burn out because they are undercompensated. And I don't
mm,
just mean financially. Part of what I look at is holistic compensation. So, working with an incredible role model gives you energy. That's
okay.
part of compensation. Working from home might be part of your compensation. Having flexibility might be part of your compensation. The type of work you do might be part of your compensation. But
Mm.
there is a financial piece to it that you need to have your needs met.
Right. Right,
And
right, true.
so I would say you're successful when you feel energetic about what you're doing, you feel aligned, and you can keep going. And so I think that many of the people doing amazing work in the world, if they shift their mindset a little bit, are able to have a bigger stage. An example would be I worked with somebody who was really wanted to dedicate her career to end factory farming.
Mm,
And she worked for a little not for profit and she was doing webinars and seminars, but really reaching very few people. And we talked about her impact, and she felt she had to be in a not for profit environment or she would be, in quotes, selling out.
mm,
And those kind of myths hold these good people back. And I love not for profits, but they're not always the stage where you can get the bigger impact. In some cases,
okay.
there are like a Khan Academy. I mean, amazing impact and reach. But in her situation, we talked about okay, so what if you worked for a private equity fund on that focused on regenerative farms? Like, how much
Right.
impact could you have there?
Sure.
And so there's always solutions. And I don't know the solutions for every model, but what I
Right.
do is start opening up the doors to the conversations. And usually the person arrives at where they can find the right balance. And I just say it's not a one size fits all. Like I've also worked with teachers, and some teachers will say, I'm definitely undercompensated for what I do. I think the majority, that's why
Yeah.
we have such a gap.
Yeah, yeah. I used to be a teacher,
Oh, oh my
so,
gosh. Thank you for
I
your work.
oh, thank you. They're overworked and undercompensated a lot, and they have a very diverse skill set that is highly transferred out into the business world. They just don't see the connection.
Yeah.
And that's I struggle with that too, sometimes going from where I was to where I am now. It's like, "Oh, wait, I have all these marketable qualities." But, you talked about compensation, limiting beliefs, and roadblocks. What would be something that somebody be saying to themselves that would be considered a roadblock to
To getting
fair
more
fair
compensation.
yeah.
Well, you've been in the coaching world, right? Like, yeah. So many coaches feel like if I'm helping somebody, I can't charge for it. They need the help. I
Mm,
owe it to
mhm,
them to help them, and so I can't raise my prices. That would be an example. So I do think that if you are, I mean, I'm not talking about being greedy.
right,
I'm
right.
talking about figuring out what feels energetically right for you. What will keep you having energy to keep going. If you are, let's say, in this coaching role and you are very drained from the conversations that you're having, my bet is that you're undercompensated for the work. You're not feeling aligned with the work and you're undercompensated for the work. And so I think it's helpful for everybody if you do feel energetic. And so it's not even the right relationship if you are
Mm-hmm.
feeling that you are carrying the burden of the conversation.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, interesting. Interesting. Why is it important to combine impact and the income in one's career?
Well, so part of my coaching background is I don't know what's best for you. You know what's best for you. So I will say that I don't think there's a one size fits all formulas where you have to do this. And you may find my original model with working in for-profit corporate world and volunteering on the side perfectly sufficient. Or lots of people will say, I make tons of money and I donate 10% every year to causes I believe in. And that is more than I would work in somewhere else. And so I'm not here to judge your model. I think it's up to you to figure out what works for you. But what I do find is we've talked about what I call the unrewarded do-gooder of somebody who is overcompensating for the world, but undercompensating for themselves. There's also the uninspired achiever. And that person is doing really well for themselves. Like often it's a lot of my business school classmates that have told me they're on the ladder climbing up and they get there and where they were getting to is not
Yeah.
even really fulfilling and feeling exciting. And some of them are even embarrassed about what they do. And
Mm,
I think that it's very hard to get off that ladder once you have your expenses and your family needs built around that. And so some of them feel trapped, but that is like another place where you can end up. And what I like to see is where you can combine both, because then I think you have this energy to be what I call the disruptor for good, where you're being compensated fairly for your work and you're doing amazing things in the world. And honestly, like what was exciting about writing this book is, and this is the case for me, is those I think are the most exciting jobs. I think that's where like the life and energy is. And
mhm.
so it's not a compromise to have to do that work. It's actually where the gold is.
Okay. So if somebody's listening and they're going, well, my job isn't very exciting, what questions can they ask themselves to kind of flip the script or at least start that process to find out where they can be disruptors for good in the world?
Yeah. Well, I part of my book is inspiration, so reading stories of people who've done it. So I think that's really helpful. And I also have a podcast that interviews people who are doing all different kinds of work that I would call in the disruptor for good category. So I think getting inspired by role models definitely helps you. And then the other piece that I do in the book is I have a lot of exercises that help people
Mm,
I open doors and ask questions, and that may spark what is the next step for you. But I would say a lot of people aren't really clear on their capabilities. And so those are your advantages. And
mm,
so I spent definitely the first 10 years of my career trying to level up weaknesses and not lean into where I had advantages.
mm,
And I would say if I could go back, I would really focus on where my capabilities are and understanding that so
mhm,
that I could use those to really excel.
mhm,
And so I think that is one piece that people can do. And any kind of strength test, I'm not like a cut and dry, you have to take the strength test. I think you can also
mhm.
ask friends and family,
Yeah.
what sets me apart. Even if you get the strength test results, see what resonates with you. You don't have to take it all as fact. It's just somebody's theory, right? And so, but try and do some excavation on what your capabilities are. And I actually include your values and your perspective in there. So it's
Yeah.
not just skills, because what
Right.
you bring, like when we're thinking about contribution, what you've experienced personally or seen or witnessed brings a perspective that gives you an advantage. And so understanding those aspects as well is important. And then I think very little work is ever done on what is the contribution you want to make to the world. And
Mm,
I have some exercises that I do, but big picture is you can look at what are the real problems we need solving. You're never going to regret contributing to one of those big issues. And then, sort of and then what personally lights you up, what are the issues you really want to solve personally, and then sort of seeing how those lists overlap or how you can find your niche. And
mhm,
for especially even young people or someone starting doing this work is even having one word, let's say it's women, refugees, wildfires, whatever it is, like you can have one word that you really want to build into your career and you start looking for opportunities to do that. And that doesn't always mean leaving your job. Let's say
Mm,
it's women. If you're in
okay.
a particular job, how can you support more women in the roles that you're doing and the products you're selling and whatever it is? But it's like all jobs are climate jobs, all jobs are jobs to support
Mm,
people. And so
yeah.
I think that once you know what the contribution is you want to make, or at least the direction, then you can start building it in and you start to see opportunities to do so.
Mm.
Um, but
It's
the
like,
ideal is you get to the point where you can actually make this declaration and say, this is what I'm going to go do and bite off. But I think it takes a while to get there.
yeah, talk about the fear factor in there because when you start talking about changing your job or changing what you're doing or running after your passion, that hesitation, maybe not even fear for some people, it might be just sheer hesitation come in there and say, I'm not sure I want to do that yet. Or there's that limiting belief that'll come back and say, I can't, I don't think I can do that, but this is where my passion lies. What do you find when you've worked with people and
Yeah.
people you interviewed? What would you
What's
say?
such a great question and just such a human experience, I think. I mean,
Mm,
even like I experience that all the time. My coach has told me something that I have really loved, which is it imposter syndrome or pioneer syndrome? And I think that most my situations are pioneer syndrome. I'm doing something new and I don't know how to do it. And that feels scary. And I don't necessarily have an example always of somebody
mm,
who's done what I'm doing. And so that feels that I mean, I started off telling you I'm an adventurer. I'm going down the path less traveled. And there
yeah.
are aspects that are like I can look to other authors, I can look to other coaches, I can gain experience and have role models that way. But my thought leadership is on my own path. And
Okay.
so I think that is a piece. And then the other part that I've actually really loved about jumping into the work that I'm doing is, and it seems so timely and relevant now, is we all need to learn to be a beginner. And I think that if
I
you are
like that.
not willing to be a beginner, work is going to get very difficult for you. And I will give an example. I interviewed somebody recently who had a conversation with a young Gen Zer. And she is an immigrant from Brazil, and she is working at a larger financial institution in Canada. And she did a management training program for them for a few years, and now she is heading up their sustainability area. And that's what she really wants to do. She's building that department. She's
Mhm.
25. There aren't people at the company who know how to do it. And there aren't a lot of people in the pipeline ahead of her that have a lot more experience. And
Mm,
so she's a beginner, but you may have to be a beginner at 50, at 60. And I think your willingness to be a beginner is just going to become so much more important as we, deal with technology, which is
yeah.
changing everything. And
Yeah.
so I think like jump in. It's pioneer syndrome. Don't worry about it. And
I've never heard of that before. Pioneer syndrome. Imposter syndrome, yes, is and it's who you ask actually depends on the definition that you get for imposter syndrome, but pioneer syndrome is just that if I heard you correctly, it's just that going out into the unknown and don't thinking that you can go ahead and do that. That
well, it's also
is
being
that
afraid. You talked about
be afraid.
fear.
Yeah,
It's
let's
being
talk about yeah.
yeah, I think it's about being afraid of something you don't know how to do.
How do
And
you overcome that then? How did you overcome that?
yeah. Okay, I will tell you for me, writing the book, the biggest fear I have is putting it out there. And I think that's quite common for authors of how am I going to do that like emotionally? And I think that the way that I deal with that is actually taking a bite out of Rick Rubin's book, The Creative Act. And what he says is, I don't have any control over how my book will land with other people.
Mhm.
That is not my job. And the more I focus on that as an artist or an author or whatever it is, any creative act, the more diluted my contribution will be. And so I've really tried to let go how it lands and
Mm,
honor the download I got and the spirit of it and get that onto paper in the best way I can in the moment of time that I'm living. And so I think that is my only job. And when I focus on that, I feel quite at peace. But of
Yeah.
course, there are nights I wake up and think, "Ah, what am I
I
doing?"
yeah, I had that too with my book. I put it out there, and when it got released, I remembered it's like, "Wow, this is great. I finished this, and wow, now I have my story out there." That's pretty vulnerable.
Yes,
And you
yes,
go, "Oh," but as you were talking about having a bigger perspective in mind, the why behind why you do what you do, to put that book out there, depending on the scope and the purpose of the book is to, if I help one people, if I help 10 people, it's 10 people more I would have helped if I didn't write the book. There's a bigger
yeah,
purpose behind that. And even 10 people is 10 people more than none,
yeah.
and so
Yeah, and I really do believe part of our role in humanity is to stand on the shoulders before us and to give our shoulders to the next people. So we only have to take a problem to the next place, and
right.
that your contribution doesn't have to do every like, sometimes I
It
think
doesn't
people
have to
can feel
complete.
overwhelmed
Yeah, it doesn't
by
have to completely solve the solution. It's kinda on the same lines of, I need to get from point A to point B, but I don't have to know all the steps in between, or it's like I have to get from A to Z, but I only have to know A, B, and C. I don't have to know the rest of the alphabet.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
sometimes we get I think you're right, I agree with that. If you're focusing on the end result, then you can't see everything in between,
Yeah,
maybe the end result is maybe the end result's gonna wind up in a different place than what you thought, and it could be a better
it
place,
very well, yeah, and actually
Yeah,
the journey is just so important because, like, if I think
I'm
of
glad
my
you made
writing a book example, one of the options when you're writing a book is to have a ghostwriter, which is totally acceptable and fine for the person in who needs a ghostwriter. I had to learn to write, but I really wanted the journey. That is who I am. I want the grit of it. I want to learn it. I want to experience it. And I got so much out of it that it wouldn't have been the same for me if I had had somebody else write it. It would have been a lot easier. I can tell you, there's no other industry I know where you throw out 90% of your work.
Yeah, I can relate. I can relate to that.
But it's so rewarding.
Mhm. Yeah, it is, it's the process along the way. I found the same thing, in writing mine. You have in your book, The Disruptor for Good framework, and you briefly touched on it. I just wanna circle back around and bring out the 4 traits that were there. You had the unrewarded do-gooders, which usually end in burnout. You have the well-rounded disruptor. That's a person who's empowered, and this is kind of where we'd want to be. The uninspired achievers that work places, that work, but then they regret, what they do is underlined by regret. And then you have the replaceable employees, which often lead to resentment. You mentioned about the well rewarded disruptor. What are some of the challenges that you found for those who are already disruptors for good?
Yeah. Well, first of all, I just say I think most people that I talk to, you would self identify where you're
Mhm.
at. And the other aspect is I think most of us have touched on various
All of them.
aspects where of that, so it's not it's not, you don't get there and you're done. It's a moving target all the time because how you're what you want to contribute to may change or expand, and how you want to be compensated for your work may change, and the dynamics change as well. So but what something that I have found being interesting is in the research that I did, I have a chapter on challenge. And what I have experienced is so many people say, very ambitious people will say, I wish I had known that I could do it and had the confidence earlier on,
Mm.
because I think I could have done so much more. I've reached all my goals and I only wish I reached higher. And I think that can feel, we talked about imposter syndrome. So there's times where that's not the case to expand and to think big. But here's what I found is in the research that I did is the people who are having an enormous positive impact on the world and being able to find a way for it to work for them personally, they are working the same amount of time as they would on a way smaller scale.
Mm. 'Kay.
So, for instance, like if we go back to the diabetes example, like for them to reach a billion people takes the same amount of time from the CEO as having a clinic that could reach 1,000 people. And so, when you're thinking about the contribution you can make in this challenge chapter, I help you think, what if you expanded it and added 3 zeros to the end of your your number, or even a million, like what,
Yeah.
a billion, like what changes? Is there a way for you to continue to deliver the same contribution and care, but to allow it to help more
Yeah.
people? And like Khan Academy is another great example. They deliberately set up as a not-for-profit model so that they could have earn the trust of
Mhm.
educators, and they have such an extensive reach on all parts of the world, all different incomes. And so it's been such an incredible way for them to get the reach and the impact that they have gone after. But again, it could be a small tutoring agency, but the team would be working the same regardless. And so when we do have these amazing people who are disruptors, who are willing to look to see what they can contribute to the world, how do we get them to think even bigger if that doesn't dilute what they're contributing?
Okay. Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah. What's one thing that you thought would be hard about helping people change their careers but wasn't? And then flip it. What's one thing you thought would be easy and then wound up being more challenging?
Can I start with the challenging first?
Sure,
Yeah.
sure.
So I think what people say they want to do and what people do is sometimes different. And a lot of the work I do is with younger professionals that are starting out in their career, because they've got the full 90,000 hours ahead of them. And
Mhm.
also because it's a generation who is adamant about aligning values with what they do for work. And
Mhm.
so what I have found is, especially in those early years, but it could be anybody, is we could do all the work and they could have it really clear what they want to focus on and what they care about in the world based on their perspective and how they could do that. And then a pharmaceutical company comes and offers them a sales position, and they've been
Mm,
looking for a job for a few months.
mhm.
They don't have the confidence yet to say no to that job. And I actually believe they
Gotcha.
need that first job to build their confidence, because, at first I thought, come on, let's just get them straight out of college. And what I have found to be challenging is when you go from learning to earning, you really do lack confidence and there is no rubric. So you don't know if you're going to do well in the world. But that first job, within 2 years, you have a pretty good idea. You know what? I've got this. I can do this. And so now how do I want to direct it? And so
Mm,
the challenge
okay.
for me was just the timing. And then is the second piece something that was easier?
Yeah. Well,
Um, well, I think the most exciting piece for me is how invigorated these disruptors for good are. Like all the conversations I have, these are happy people. They're very fulfilled. They're proud of their work. They can like tell their kids with all their heart, like, I'm so excited that I'm solving this
yeah.
problem, that this is what I'm doing. And so I'm not, I think it would be so much harder to try convince somebody to turn the dimmer down on their life.
Mhm.
It's actually, you're turning it up.
Okay. What would your advice be to somebody who's later in life, realizing they're not a disruptor for good and looking to become a disruptor for good? Because you talked about somebody in their 20s and they've got that 90,000 hours ahead of them. Somebody who's in their 40s or 50s or even 60s, they're saying, wow, I'm feeling, listening to you, and they're going, I'm feeling this burn inside of me that I want to be disruptor for good. What would your advice
Yeah.
be to them?
I mean, I think it's going to give you so much energy and excitement and purpose. And I think as we get older, that is a life fuel. So I
Mm,
would say jump in. The same exercises I have for somebody younger are all relevant as well, plus all your lived experiences that you may be
right.
able to channel. I have not met a young person who doesn't have something they care about already. And I can tell you that the old people have something they care about too. So figure out what it is you care about. What could
Mm.
you contribute, and start spending time there on any form, whether it's volunteering, mentoring somebody. I mean, you could put your energy into mentoring somebody who's going to go do amazing things. So it depends on your time and your resources and what you can do. But I would say the only limitation is getting started. And like we talked about being a beginner, jump in. It's okay. And share your wisdom.
Small step right there. Just to get
Absolutely.
just to get
Yeah.
started and overcome that initial fear, like, what do you have to lose, right? And so
Yeah. And we
yeah,
talked about, if you can get attached to something bigger than you, then
yeah.
those fears become really small. Like,
Yeah, yeah,
we've
and you
got
need a
problems to
driver
solve.
too. Yeah, you need a driver too. I would think if you don't have something bigger than you and it starts getting hard, then do you find people more easily would give up if you don't have that bigger, higher purpose or the
Yeah.
drive behind it?
Yeah. I mean, I think I do believe that we can find meaning really wherever we are. So I think that focusing on how you bring meaning into what you do is an important piece of it. It's not always like the grass is greener somewhere else. Like I
Yeah.
think you can actually change things and bring meaning to right where you are, but it's a decision.
Yeah. I have a curious question. I'm thinking about the person who has started to pursue their dreams. They're running after something, but then they're starting to have questions, realizing that maybe this isn't the right path. It could be a good cause, but maybe it's not right for them. What are some questions they can ask themselves to really determine whether or not they need to keep running after this thing or whether it's time to course correct and maybe reevaluate and go in a different direction?
Yeah, I that is actually the question that I thought about a lot in the book. And I talk about a character which is a sort of a compilation of different people I've coached and myself. And I call her Grace in the book. And she is about to turn 30 and she's been working for a foundation and done amazing work. And everybody high fives her for incredible work she's doing in Africa. And she's traveling there every 2 weeks. And she's getting to 30 and she's underpaid. And although she's contributing positively in the world, she is starting to really burn out. And she is resentful that her friends are able to buy apartments and start putting deposits down and go on vacation. And she's starting to really feel limited by her work. And she's considering switching to investment banking. And that is the character that I bring through in the story of the book. But yes, I have dealt with a lot of people who are contributing positively to the world. And the question is, are you contributing to anything or the thing you want? And I think that's something that we don't spend enough time on is where do you want to contribute? And so I think understanding what's important to you and doing some excavating on your life, and again talked about perspective and lived experiences and values, helps you get there and determine what the right experience is for you. And I think, I mean, people talk about purpose and it feels really daunting. I usually say a personal mission. Like, what's your personal
Mm,
mission? Because it just feels less like, you have to have that wake up aha moment one day. You can design a personal mission. And again, you can start with one word that you're chasing or two words like the environment in Mexico, let's say. Those are the two words you want to combine and look for something that's what's really important for you. So you start with that and then you get deeper and deeper into it. And I bet you eventually find the thing that you are 100% connected to and you're on the train now and that's where you're going.
Well, Georgie, I've been enjoying our conversation. I have 3 questions I ask everybody. So the first is share a book or resource that's had a significant impact on you.
Okay, so this is going to be a little bit of a random book, but well, for the conversation. But the book that I think has changed me the most is Women Who Run with the Wolves.
Mm,
And it's by Clarissa Pinkola Estes. And it is a book that it's geared towards women, but the complexity of women. And
mm,
it includes a lot of tales and mythology that I have loved reading because a lot of what we go through in life is very repetitive in these experiences. Other people have lived too.
mm,
And I think her book is something, it's not actually, you can't read it like a book. It's like reading a Bible. Like
mm.
you can only digest so much at a time. And when you read it, you just, I don't know, for me, the lights went off and I just couldn't believe it. But an example is like one of her chapters deals with intuition. And I always thought intuition was sort of like on off, like you felt it or you
Mhm,
didn't. But in her book, she tells this wonderful story, and you arrive at the point where intuition is a whole bunch of steps. I can't remember if it's like 8 steps or 9 steps or something. And there's all different pieces of it. And one of the
mm,
pieces is sorting, and you sort through all the wisdom. And that is not a quick on and off. And I'm a
mm,
very intense sorter. I sort during the night. But like I think through all the pieces and pick out the good
mhm.
ones. And so I have really loved her book.
The next question is one of my favorites, and take it wherever you'd like to go. What's one question or topic you wish I would have asked about, and how would you have answered the question or expanded on the topic?
Okay, so I always feel like the conversation that we've had is the conversation we're meant to have had. I think the hardest part for me about being on a podcast is I want to know a lot about you too. And so I think
That's
if there
funny.
was anything that I would change, it would be I would love to hear your thoughts and your opinions and what move you and how we connect and what we've had as a similar journey. But I know that's not the vehicle right now for that, but hopefully we'll get to do that another time.
I would love to. I think that'd be awesome. As we close, what is one small step that someone can do today that's going to help them change their tomorrow? And you've given lots of steps, but I want to sum it up at the end. Just pick
Yeah.
one.
Okay. What is the problem you're solving and is it worth your time? I think that is like the thought I would leave you with. And if your mother or your grandmother or grandfather can understand the problem you're solving, you're off to the races.
Love it. Georgie, how can people find you?
Yeah, for the book, if you go to workthat'sworthit.com, that is all the information on the book is there. Or also, like my whole website is at georgienthoven.com. And I won't spell it for you, but it may require someone going to your show notes to
Yes,
to
that's
get the
fine.
spelling.
It will be there. Well, thank you. Thank you again for the gift of your time. I have thoroughly enjoyed our conversation. I'm walking away with some really good questions that I'm going to go ask myself as I transition into the next iteration of my life as well. So thank you for the conversation.
Thank you so much for having me. It's been wonderful to be with you and on this journey.
Thank you for listening to another episode of the Small Steps, Big Wins podcast. I value your time with me and I seek to make every moment count. In order to make lasting change in your life, listening is usually not enough. So I want to ask you, what practical steps are you going to put into action today as a result of listening to this podcast? Remember, any step, any action, no matter how small, starts your journey to a big win. And if you're not sure where to get started, reach out to me and let's have a conversation. Until next time, love yourself, then love others. Peace.